Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle.
And I'm Frank Augustine. Welcome to Chasing Legends.
Welcome back to Chasing Legends. We're out here at Burns Ranch one more time. Getting close to the final time, aren't we? It looks like it's starting to disappear behind us, but we came out again. We wanted to tell the story of Burns Ranch. But before we start, please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment if you want to leave a comment, hit the About section for t-shirts, black, gray, long sleeve, short sleeve, Dutch Hunter Rendezvous, Legend of the Superstition Mountains. Cool, we got through all that, right, Frank?
That's it.
Now, to the story, Burns Ranch. Now the story I'm going to tell from the start, and you should stay to the end because when you catch the end, it's going to kind of turn everything kind of back upside down on you. Now start, according to the newspapers and Henry and Helen Burns, Henry had come over in a wagon. They were some early pioneers, his family. And Henry Burns came out with his family and settled in the Phoenix area. And there, while working at a restaurant or store, he met his wife, Helen. Now, the interesting story about Henry's upbringing is he was captured by the Apaches. You believe that?
No.
Okay, well, that's what Henry said. And he was raised by the Apaches. So when Henry married Helen, the Apaches, his Apache friends told him, we know of a piece of property where there's nice trees, which there is, a nice place down where there's you can have a well and some water.
Yeah, water.
And so he came and they settled and they did a homestead here. Now, they leased the land at the time from the county, but they homesteaded here and they built a small little place over here and some fences and stuff. They had some chickens and burros and a couple horses. Now, the stories that go along with Burns Ranch is one of the ones that's always told is that the Apaches would want to trade in town, so they would come to Burns Ranch and they would stay away from the house, but they would throw rocks. And when Helen or Henry heard, Henry would go out and meet with them, and what they would do is do trade with him. And they would trade things and give him things so he could go trade because a white man would trade better than an Apache in town. And then they would split kind of the profits off of that, what extra they got. And that was one of the first stories. The second story was Henry Burns there was a section in the mountains that the Apaches were deathly afraid of. And when they went through, they'd hear voices, Frank. Can you believe that? They heard voices in their heads and it scared them.
That's because it was the Holy Stones.
So Henry went out to this spot and found there were these purple and black stones and all this stuff, and that's what was causing them fear. So he gathered them all up, brought them back over here and put them in a cave and kind of put it away to kind of lay their fears over the whole thing. Now the next story is he had gold and silver mines because the Apaches told him where they were, and he was mining a little bit of gold and silver and with the trades, and he was amassing this stuff, and he had two children, a boy and a girl, which nobody ever claimed to have ever met or seen. But on his property, the story is the Burns treasure is he buried in the different spots for each of them and his wife Helen. He buried treasure. Yes, they're working right behind us here on the road. So, welcome to Chasing Legends. So, they buried this stuff, and then each person, Helen and each of the children, were given directions and certain codes and stuff of where the treasure was buried here. And according to the stories one of them was, the boy came out and dug up his share. And nobody knows what it was, but he got his share and left. So all this is in the Pinal County Reporter or whatever, and the Territorial News, and they've told these stories, and Helen and Henry told these stories to people over the years. As we move forward, Tom Collenborn was out in the area, and he'd met Henry and Helen. Now you gotta remember, Henry was only about 5'6", 5'7", and Helen was only 4'6". She was a very small lady. And Tom would come out and stop by, and he would say they were the poorest people he ever met. But he also said they were very nice people. A little off, but nice people.
He told me they lived in a chicken coop.
There. They actually lived in a house and it had a door and everything.
And right here in this spot, Henry would call Tom up and say, there's UFOs out here, hurry up, get out here. And he claimed the UFOs were flying in the east direction up over this mountain toward the Staircase Mine.
Now, Henry took pictures of these. He bought a camera and was developing film, but Tom always said the pictures were blurry, he couldn't tell, and Tom never bothered to come out to see what he was. Tom even told me it could have been birds flying through the air for all he knew. But Henry swore by these lights would travel through here and travel over the mountains towards Hieroglyphic Canyon and disappear. So we had all these stories, and then around 1965, Henry dies. His wife, now the story is that Henry went to California to sell some gold and his partner beat him almost to death. When Henry came back, he didn't recover from his injuries, told his wife not to trust the partner and to get him out of there because that guy was going to steal the treasures from her and the children. Well, we don't know if he had a partner, but she married a man named Louis Humphreys like 3 months after Henry dies. Louis doesn't even last more than a couple of years, and Louis dies, and Helen's here by herself. Now, Helen lives here for a number of years, but then she finally moves around 1969 into town. She lives in Apache Junction, and she lives near some friends. But she locked up the ranch and what was still out here. So she came out one day to clean the rest of the stuff out because she was worried somebody was going to steal it all, and they had a tack room. And the value they put at that time was around $500 worth of tack, saddles and gear and stuff. They also had the burro still out here, but he was running loose. So they put hay out just to hopefully lure him back. But the person she came out with was an individual we all heard of, Robert Simpson Jacobs, known as Crazy Jake. Crazy Jake, his wife and his 2 daughters came out with her, brought her out in their Jeep, and she was putting all her stuff together. Well, Helen was out here, and then Jake said, you know what, we got too much stuff. I'm gonna have to go back into town. We're gonna have to get my horse trailer and bring it out loaded up. So he said, let's go. And Helen said, there might be a few things in the house I wanna gather. So he walked up to the front of the house with her, thought everything's fine, there wasn't much in the house. He walked back to check out and pull some stuff out of the shed, and he heard a pop. And he asked his wife, what did you hear? And she said, I think it was the screen door slamming shut. And Jake said that didn't sound like a screen door, went inside, found Helen on the ground with a bullet hole in her head, slumped up against the wall. So he sent his wife off in the Jeep, because Helen was still alive at the time, and she went to get the deputies. They came out to check her. And then the story gets more interesting, because when they did the autopsy on Helen, she had 2 bullets in her head. What they think, and the coroner believes, was the rifle, she made her own powder and her own bullets. She didn't have enough powder, and one of the bullets stuck in the rifle barrel, or the gun barrel, and then the second one, both of them came out and hit her.
What I think happened is they double loaded the round. They put one lead bullet in, got distracted, then put another one in, and loaded it down, so when you shot the one bullet, 2 come out.
That makes sense if it's a rifle, right?
Well,
it was a 38 special.
Yeah, it was a pistol.
So.
And then another interesting twist on all this. At the front porch was a rock for the first step. And after they haul her off, Jake takes and he turns that rock over, and underneath the rock there was a map carved into the stone. So that was his real interest. He wanted that map because he thought that led to the Burns treasure.
What supports this is his wife later, after they got divorced, said he came out to talk to Helen 3 days earlier about the treasure and what she knew about the treasure that he'd heard about. So Jake had an interest. Years later, he would tell people he found Helen. They drove up and found her dead in her chair. She'd committed suicide out front. The story in some of the papers early on was she was beaten, which the coroner's report says she was not beaten, and that she was found dead in the outhouse, which is not true. So that's kind of like we get to the end of the road. Now, the stones, we'll unpack that later. That involves Rick Gwynn, our friend Rick Gwynn, Emery Taylor, Salvador DeGrazia, and a bunch of people. They came out here and dug a bunch of stuff up, and they dug the holy stones because Chuck Crawford came out, found them out of the cave, reburied them in coffee tins here. They think they got most of them, but they dug a bunch of that stuff up.
And then, by the way, if you look behind us, you see a hill back there. That's called Treasure Hill, and that's where all the coffee cans full of stones were found.
Yep, and we actually videoed that for a future Legend Superstition Mountains episode. We were out here with Rick Gwynn before he passed away, and we came out and he was showing us the places and all the things that were out here. So there's all these stories. Now, supposedly on this hill that Frank talked about, 2 gentlemen also dug up a skull that was an elongated skull up out of there, and supposedly it was some sort of extraterrestrial alien skull. So there's almost every story you can believe. Rick Gwynn told us about a Bigfoot he saw in here. Some people tell me there's a portal. There's been paranormal researchers come in here and say there's something wrong with this place. Frank and I would agree there's something wrong with everybody that comes into this place and lives. Fortunately, we seem to be fine. Now, the end of the tale is Henry Burns supposedly put a curse on the place and all this stuff, if something happened to him, and it would curse everybody and afterwards and all this stuff. I don't know if there's a curse. I don't know if there's a treasure. But then we come to the problem where, what's the real story? Well, the first problem we have is Henry Burns said he was born and they brought him out in a wagon train, and he came to Arizona early and he was a pioneer settler, and he was raised by the Apaches because they captured him for a while, and that's how he befriended the Apaches. Henry Burns was born Gustav Henry Burns, or Harry Burns, mind you. He was born in 1891 in Salinas, Colorado. His father's name was Heinrich Burns, and his mother was from Iowa. His father died by 1900, and Henry ended up going back and forth between Colorado and Iowa for a while with his mother, stay with her family. Well, it gets even more interesting because, Frank, believe it or not, when he's 15, 16, he gets a buddy to hook him up with this girl. Now, the girl's name is Flora Meldrum. And he marries Flora Meldrum, and then he goes to her uncle, who's a very wealthy man, and asks to borrow money off of him because he has an estate he's getting from his father, and he tells all the story. The twist in the story is when Flora marries him, his name is Archie Marion Forbes. He's changed his name now. He marries her, and she's now Mrs. Forbes, and he goes over and talks to her uncle, Meldrum, and lo and behold, he gets suspicious. They investigate. Archie, who's actually Henry, who's actually Gustav, actually goes to jail for 4 to 5 years for fraud and embezzling. She divorces him, of course, the following year. And while he's in jail, he registers for World War I. At that point, he is still Archie Marion Forbes. But then, suddenly, when he does his World War I, when they do the draft papers, he becomes Arthur Marion Forbes. Imagine that, Frank, how hard it is to chase this guy. He keeps changing his name every time you turn around. He gets out of jail, and the first thing he does is he marries a woman named Mabel. He marries Mabel in like 1919. And now with Mabel, she is Mrs. Archie Marion Forbes. And that's how they live. And they have 4 children whose last name is Forbes. And these 4 children, them live in Colorado.
These other wives, did he ever divorce them?
The first wife divorced him. Now, here's the second wife. Now, he has 4 children. In 1928, Mabel dies. So he promptly, within 6 to 8 months, marries a woman named Helen Martha, and that's the Helen Burns we all know and love. And he marries her as Arthur Marion Forbes. 1929. 1930, he remarries her now, and now he changes his name, believe it or not. He now becomes, hold on, it's so difficult. He is now Harry Gus Burns. I don't know. So Harry Gus Burns, who is Gustav, who is Arthur, who is Archie, now marries Helen, and they adopt all the children, and all the children now become Burns. Imagine how confused they are that their dad was Archie Burns and then Arthur Burns, and now he is Harry Burns. So they had come out, and then they moved to Los Angeles in the early 40s. Well, kind of dissipates all the wagon story, doesn't it, and the Apaches and everything. They live in San Bernardino Valley where they raise the children. And he works as a quartz miner and a carpenter. I don't know what quartz mining would do. Maybe in Colorado there was something for it, but not in California in the 1940s?
Well, yeah, with the gold, gold and quartz.
Okay,
Who knows?
Who knows? So he lives in San Bernardino. Sometime in the mid to late 40s, he and Helen finally moved to Arizona. He moves to Arizona, and when he comes here, he becomes Henry Gus Burns. So Helen doesn't change her name. Helen has to be aware of something, right? He's Arthur, he's Archie, he's Harry, now he's Henry. And we now have Henry Burns. And that kind of unpacks it. Now the reason we know this is when Helen dies, her friends came and helped her get her stuff and all, but her daughter, a woman named Mrs. Robert Whitmire, comes out. And her name is Barbara. And Barbara Whitmire was Barbara Burns, formerly Barbara Forbes. And by doing that, you can start backtracking her history and find all this stuff happening. So one of the problems with the whole Burns Ranch thing is He appears to be a swindler and a con man, pretty much like Crazy Jake.
Pretty much like everybody that lived in this section.
And it's like a Bermuda Triangle of weirdness. There are murders here, mysterious deaths. There's bodies buried out here. There's treasure stories. Bob Ward was right behind us. Before him was Henry DeCook, who shot himself in the head and hung around long enough to walk around for a while.
And you can hear the backhoe digging back there. Any day, they're going to pop a body out of the ground.
Any moment now they could yell, "Hey, it's a skull!" But anyways, all this is going to dissipate.
And it's an alien skull.
Yeah. But there's the UFO stories and all the people came out here. The problem is, as we unpack everything, is every story derives from another story, but we also realize he was never Henry Burns. He never met the Apaches. He was not the Apache friend. And it's a shame that so many people who have left us never really understood. He could have been a nice old man, but it appeared he was a storyteller. And he was obviously a liar too, I guess you could say. But somehow he outrun everybody, and in the end, the newspapers basically almost deified him and his Burns Ranch treasure. Now the strange thing is, the one true story in it all I found was all 4 children supposedly was a treasure. 2 of them didn't care, 1 couldn't find hers, and the boy still, it says, came out, dug up, and found his share. Well, we don't know. He passed away, and the family doesn't want to talk about this, but there appeared to be something they dug up out here.
Well, there's also the story where this young man came out and stayed with them for a period of time.
Yes.
He was like an adoptive son, and he found out something from Henry, and he ended up back here on top of Rich Hill, and the reason they knew he was up there is he had a Polaroid camera, and he was taking shots in a certain spot, and when you pull those old Polaroids apart, you had the aluminum foil thing with the developer in it and everything. They found those up on top of the hill laying around.
So towards the end of his life too, Henry had a lot of health issues. They in fact said a couple guys he conned into working for him. When they would get up in the morning, come get him, put him in a cart, and they'd wheel him down to his claims. And he would sit in the cart while they worked on his claims.
Which were across Florida Road. There were claims across a couple mines he had. Can you imagine pushing somebody in a cart from here across Peralta Road?
We'll bring a cart next time. You can push me up the hill.
No, thank you.
Okay, well, there we go. But I think a lot of this is unpacking is there's going to be people telling stories about Burns Ranch now. And it's best to get to the truth. Because the truth always has something hidden in it, something to unpack, something mysterious, still something out here. Who knows what could be dug up out here? We know the mysterious deaths. We know at least 3 or 4. And all this runs all the way to San Mateo Castro Ranch. So we'll continue to tell the stories out here, and we'll spend a little time around here poking around and looking around, see, because they got piles, what we could call spoil piles, and see if we see anything sticking out of it from back in the day as they uncover this, because who knows what they could have buried out here.
I'll get those for some coffee cans.
And well, we already have holy stones. By the way, the holy stones, which we will talk about later, Frank and I are proud owners of holy stones. Frank has 1, I think I have 3, but his looks like the devil head, so it's really cool. He specifically picked that. Imagine how that gravitated to him. It talks to Frank. Mine don't talk. They just hang out in the garage, listen to music. Oh well. So that's about it for Chasing Legends. I hope everybody enjoyed this and learned a lot, because there's a lot to unpack and kind of go back in time and everything. So, Gustav Harry Burns. I guess that doesn't have the ring of the Henry Burns and the Burns Ranch.
There's a lesson in all this. The lesson is you'll read one of these treasure stories, and without doing your homework, such as Wayne has done, people go running out here, digging a place up, trying to find a treasure that never existed.
But it's in everything.
Other than some quartz.
But everything you do is preparation. If I'm going to talk about something, I want to prepare and make sure I know what I'm talking about and look at some details. The details jumped out at me and I said, well, I want to check this, I want to check that. Next thing you know is I got a sheet full of things that I'm like, holy, I never knew this. No one ever spoke about it. I've never seen it in print. But the idea is it doesn't always put the kibosh on everything out here, but it opens up that, you know, he could have been, who knows what he could have been taken out here and hiding, because he didn't trust the government or the state or anybody, obviously. So there could be very well something out here. We'll take a look around. I'm doubting it, but. Yeah.
And if you think about it, with all these wives, some had money.
Yeah.
He could have stashed some cash in this area.
So.
For his old age.
So to Gustav, to Archie, to Arthur, to Harry, to Henry Burns. One heck of a name, buddy. But I don't know if the curse gets lifted with the road going through, but we're sorry to see everything go. Hope you rest in peace, you and Helen. And until the next time, this was Chasing Legends. I'm Wayne Tuttle.
And I'm Frank Augustine.
You're not. And take care.